as I see, we have not one presenter, we have a group. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. So I hope you can hear me okay. If not, I can talk even louder than this. As Bernhart said, I brought some colleagues with me. There's also a really good reason for that. And if we just go ahead and get started, we have the topic, the Solution Manager for all test cases. We forgot the question mark behind it, but I hope you'll forgive us and keep that in mind. And at some point, we're also going to... that looks good. Sorry. That was one too far. Exactly. So, and talking about go-lives, that doesn't look that bad at all. But the question is, if you see this, I think maybe you already noticed it from the start, from the first talk. If these pictures remind you of the last go-live, I think every developer has had situations where everything's working fine, and then you go to production, and it kind of works like this. I think it has something to do with age, but at some time, the developers already said, okay, enough action, enough drama, we'd like to work a little bit better. And one of the topics, or one of the things that they discovered, or one of the approaches that they decided on was test-driven development. Now, obviously, me as a solution manager consultant, I'm not going to try to talk to a room of developers about test-driven development. That's why I brought a couple of colleagues with me, and I'll have them take over the first part of the presentation.
Thank you, Heiko. Hello. I have another quick analogy for you, without sound this time. This is a picture made in Washington, 1923, of a productive test of a bulletproof vest. So I'd like to ask you, when was the last time you were shot at, if you had to release something? This is how I would feel in this situation, so I prefer not to do that, and not bring in this picture at all, best case. How do we do that? 56% of all defects that are created during a development process have their origin in the requirement phase. So there's no need to test in the end of the process shortly before going live. You can do that way earlier. Only 7% of all problems that you run into had their origin in the coding phase. So there's no need to wait until you're done with coding. You can even test earlier and test the designs and everything. The same is true for the unit costs. So if you say, doesn't matter if it's an apple or an euro or dollar, whatever, if you say you have to spend 1 unit to fix a defect, bug, whatever you call it, in your design phase, then it's 100 times more costly to do that after you're in production and you're live. The same is also true for the time you need to fix things. If you try to find a defect and want to remove it, the average time, according to a study from, I think, Xerox was it, was 25 minutes if you're still in the design phase or started with coding, and 1,405 minutes on average in a productive scenario. So I would prefer to do it like this, not be in the picture at all, and just shoot at the bulletproof vest and check out my findings and try to remove them before I go on in the process.
Okay, thanks, Jens. So next part is when Heiko talked to me, told me something about test-driven development. I want to show it, test automation and solution.
Take the microphone.
Okay.
Far better to understand.
Yeah.
Okay. So when Heiko talked to me the first time, he said, "Oh, I want to show something about Solution Manager, test automation, and test-driven development." I just thought, or even told him, "Okay, test-driven development is not a test strategy; it's a design strategy. It starts very early in the process." So, but next thing I thought it was, let's see how we can link, how we can profit from test-driven development, even in the Solution Manager later on. And therefore, to show it, to test it even, I created 2 small examples with unit tests. And so to find an easy topic, I choose a calculator with some limited operations to add two values, to multiply them, because then it is very easy just to show, okay, this result is correct, this result is wrong. Okay, so first test case is data dictionary class. Yeah, as I just told you, I set up some methods. I do not implement them. I just set up them to have the possibility to compile it and to see if everything is correct, is syntactically correct. Okay. And then the next step is I need test methods for it. I think test-driven development is known by nearly anybody here. Even the developers should know how test-driven development works, so this presentation should handle with it. Just to show, I build up the method and easy example, when I multiply two values, 6 and 2, I expect 12 as a result. To show how we could handle errors here, I add also a test method for a modular operation, and I set up a signature in the data dictionary class, but the method has no content, so this would lead into an error. Okay. Yeah, this is, as I said, test-driven development. You first have to write the test. Next step is to write the implementation of the method. So just to show it here, it's very easy. As an example, divide and multiply two values. Okay. The second test case, because data dictionary class is one example, so I set up a second example with a small report, same logic, just the possibility to calculate some values, and I implemented with the local class and also a local test class. Here you can see it, it's beginning with CUT, code under test, and same logic as before, I have got 5 test methods. And here, again, as you can see here, it's the test method for the addition. Yeah, I couldn't say anything about. And this is the local test class, the local class I implemented. There I just use the data dictionary class that you have already seen before, and I just use the logic that is already implemented here. Okay. When I want to exit the unit tests, also just I use Eclipse as a development environment. I think most of us will do the same. And I can start the unit tests here direct from the source code. And as a result, as I've already told, the modular operation, there is no logic within the method. Therefore, on the right side, you can see I expect the result 1, because there is no logic in the method. I get as a result 0. So here in test-driven development, I will receive an error message. Okay, this is just that we need some examples to include them, so that Heiko has laid on the possibility to show what is possible in the Solution Manager. Next step we have to do is we need the integration with the ABAP test cockpit. This is also a very small part. I just want to show what we have to do to set this to active. First is in transaction ATC. We just have to set up a global check variant. This is always needed because later on you have to set this check variant in the customizing so that you can work with it. Next step is the behavior on the release. There we said, okay, block on any error, priority 1 or 2. And also when you see the read the help, they said, if you use the ATC to do something, just disable the code inspector, because you shouldn't work with both in this case. Okay. Next is we have to set in customizing that the unit test should be used from the code inspector and also from the other test cockpit. This we set up in the SCI, in transaction SCI. And there we just have, as it is marked there, we just have to set the flag for the out unit tests, for the dynamic tests. And when we then, it's also again done from Eclipse, we can choose the about test cockpit, and when we run these tests, we again get here the critical error, and then it's another picture. And no, just correct. Here we got the critical error again. It's the same. The modular operation will give another result than expected. This is everything we can see in Eclipse. Next is when we go to transaction as intent to the transport organizer. There we have the same possibilities. If we just check the content of our transport, we see, okay, ATC checks, we get 2 messages back, and if we double click on them, we come to the right screen, and here we got further information, what test goes wrong, what is really the issue here, so that we have the possibility to correct it. Okay, thanks. That's so far. Then I hand over to Heiko.
Yeah. I think I was okay without microphone. Try it. If, like I said, first of all, if I'm too quiet, please say so. The other thing is also I have a tendency to talk a little quickly. If you have trouble following me, then just say so, and I'll try to slow it down a bit. But now I get to come to the Solution Manager part of it. The colleagues have already provided me with the classes and with the ATC implementation. And the thing is, if as a Solution Manager consultant, you come into a room of developers and you say Solution Manager, you kind of feel like the guys down here on the ground in the video, again, from a fall guy. As a matter of fact, and also our team lead for the developers, she's also sitting up there coordinating the attack on me. I think we can go on. But it's just, it's basically, Solution Manager is not a development tool, and that's obvious. And the thing is, as Marcus just mentioned, his mantra, it's not a test paradigm, it's a design and development paradigm. And that's basically the first error in my thinking. I was like thinking, yeah, test-driven development. Well, obviously we're going to use a test suite. And that's not right at all. If you know the functionality of SAP Solution Manager, the test suite is basically there to coordinate large tests, usually when you have a large implementation project where you have this huge test organization, you have a whole bunch of test cases, not ideal for test-driven development. So what do we use instead? And instead of that, it's the entire development phase is actually just one status in the change management scenario. And so instead, we're going to use the change management process, because that's where we have the development activities. And that's also where we have the possibility, and that's also Solution Manager standard, to basically go into and take these ATC cockpit tests and show the results and also interact with that. So just the basics from the charm or change request management is that the change process is basically split into 2 parts in the Solution Manager. On the left-hand side, we have the change request, and the change request is basically there just to document the specification, scope determination, and also then the approval procedure before we move on into the implementation stage, which is then documented in form of a change document. I2 would just be change. And there is basically, we document the implementation, and we also have the control of the transports. And so just taking a look at the start of the RFC process, where we're just like, okay, well, how do we get that TDD into this standard SAP change management? Within the RFC, usually you create an RFC, then you have validation, then it has to be set to be approved. After that, it goes to a CAB and it gets approved, change advisory board, sorry. And all of this is done in SAP standard by the change manager, which I don't really think is very realistic, because the validation phase, I don't think the change manager is really going to be the person to take a look at the requirements and determine, okay, well, what do I need to be able to do this? So usually you already have like some kind of a developer, somebody, or a designer, solution designer, or architect who's involved in the process, but they're not very, you can't see them because they're not formally defined in the process. And so what we decided, first of all, what's very important is that we need a verification step in the front. And the reason for this is, as part of the TDD methodology, in the creation phase, the user gives a test case. as a part of the specification into this entire process. And the problem what we're trying to avoid is that if this test case is too generic, or if it's even too specific, in the cases it's too specific, the developer doesn't have the possibility to decide on the design himself because he's basically got something in the specification that is keeping him from being free to decide how to solve the problem the best. If it's too generic, then he probably doesn't understand the problem that he's trying to solve, which can also cause irritations later in the process. So we have a verification phase, and we added the role of the solution architect, who basically verifies this test case with the user, with the person that requested the change, in order to determine, okay, is this the kind of quality that we need, so that the developer, as soon as this goes into implementation, that he needs to be able to implement this. And basically, all we have in here is just to show in the Solution Manager have the possibility to add documents that would be then basically this user test case or user test cases, which we then use in the verification phase, which is then also passed later into the change document where the developer can find the test cases. It doesn't have to go searching for it on SharePoint or anywhere else. So now we're in the change part of it, the change document. It's been approved, the RFC, and now we're going to the implementation phase. Again, it's created, and this is the part where the developer takes it into development, and after that it goes on to be tested. Doesn't really fit to the TDD methodology, because if we keep it in our heads, we're actually testing a whole lot. We write the test cases and we keep performing them again and again and again in this phase. So the test phase in the back doesn't really fit anymore. And so what we've done here, first is added this peer review step into the process, because usually with the code we also have somebody that also checks the tests that the developer wrote. Nobody would do this, but there was the hypothetical scenario that a tester would just assert true and send true, and then it just comes out and the test passes and nobody knows if the code is any good or not. So we have the peer review basically also integrated into the process as a separate step, with also the additional role of a peer reviewer. Okay, okay, and now what happens is we just saw it in the ATC. We have this flag that we were able to set, or this drop down, where we were able to determine what happens on release. Well, that's when I release it from our development system into the test system, is when these ATC checks are performed automatically. And also this is done without any setup in Solution Manager pretty much. It almost functions out of the box. And basically what you're seeing here is exactly the same errors that we got, and that would actually keep us from being able to sit this into the peer review process, but would actually make the developer go back into the code. Now the thing is this going to happen? Most likely not, because he's performed this test like kind of, I don't know, maybe 5 times, maybe 10 times, maybe 15 times already. If the developer is surprised by the result here, you're not doing TDD. But we also have the possibility to add other checks. And one of them, for example, is this cross-reference check. And this is actually a live example from a system that we had the other day, where we were trying to push something into the development, into the test system. And it notified us, so hey, you've got an object in here, and it references another object, but this object is not in your system. And it also, here where I kind of graded out, even told me in which transport this object is in, so that I can see stuff like that too. And that's something that the ATC probably would not realize, but it's also something I can do. And it's also a pretty good idea. The thing is, first of all, I don't need the Solution Manager for this. As long as I have the STPI plugin, then I can call this under this transaction in my development system and have these checks performed. So we don't have to have the Solution Manager to do it, but these checks run automatically. And the important thing is also that we don't need this to perform the tests, but we're documenting the tests in this entire change, so that this is also transparent for everybody else who's involved, of all the stakeholders in this change process, whereas all the tests that the developer is performing, they're not seeing them. They're not visible, so we have to believe, okay, yeah, it's being done, but this way we've also got it documented. And coming on to our next slide, for the conclusion, yeah, like I said, change management is not going to help in development. Solution management is not a development tool, but we can MacGyver something out of it. And some of the possibilities of some of the advantages, I just mentioned them, but first of all, I think Marcus is going to explain to us what the changes are for the developers if we implement this.
So yeah, as you can read here for the developers, it's TDD, so you have to. Okay, I'm too quiet. Sorry. For TBB, you have to think about the designs before the implementation. So you get better code quality, you get a better design. Next step is you don't have less work. You have to do the same work as before. Sometimes even more, because sometimes you just start the implementation without thinking about the design. You don't gain flexibility. Again, you have the same steps to do as before. You don't have to go any new way here, it's just the same way with other functionality. Do have less documentation? Sometimes, because you can think about if you have to document all the tests, if you use unit tests, they are already documented as I have shown before. And very important from my side, you have easier maintenance, because normally when an issue comes from a customer system, you have to maintain code that isn't written by you. So you have to understand what happens there. And then it's much more easy if you have a lot of unit tests and a lot of documentation to just to be able to understand the code and to do the maintenance here. And the tester, next step, the tester can concentrate on the business test, because through the unit test, the test already knows, okay, everything works technically as expected. So he or she just can concentrate, what are my business cases, and can concentrate on them. And if there is a wrong result, then it comes back to the developer, and they have to think again. But until now, it's easier for them because, yeah, they just know the underlying technique works as expected.
Okay, then we've also got the change manager, and he's basically taking the part of any other stakeholders in the process. You do have more transparency and information, because you can see that the tests were done successfully. You also see which tests were run, and you also have additional checks that are running, which also gives you a better feeling before all of it goes into production, because you know there are no objects missing with some of these other automatic tests that I can perform. And also in top of the form of the process, you do have a single source of truth, because everything is actually documented in the Solution Manager from the start to the end, the user tests, the technical tests, that they will run successfully all the way up until the changes go into the production. And most important?
Yeah, last but not least, we also have the customer. I guess we can all agree that there's a better code quality. Some customers might disagree with the saving of the costs. But I think if you ignore the upfront costs that you have if you include something like this, in the long run you will definitely save money doing this for the customers. Thank you.
So then, thank you. First of all, that was the presentation. And now I think we're open for questions. I think we still have like 2 or 3 minutes. Yep. It's better than the trial run. There we were at 5 seconds. So if you have any questions or comments, then we'd be more than happy to hear them. Now the questions, yeah. No questions. Doch, okay. Got one.
The sub-landscape for a custom.
Oh, yeah, that's maybe easier.
From the perspective of a customer, we have today 3 parts, 3 clusters in logic stacks. First one, traditional SAP with a net stack. Second one, modern SAP without that, in the cloud, for example. And the third part is non-SAP. So, have you some experience to handle with the Solution Manager these test cases over all technologies and developments there?
Okay, so I think it's a very interesting question. It's a very valid question. What I can say to it, and I'll have to give the second part of the question over to one of my colleagues, I do know that the Solution Manager provides possibilities to integrate non-SAP changes and also to control them with an add-on. It's also possible to add or to add Jenkins to it, so that over Jenkins we can make sure, for example, that's on a Java application or something, that the changes are going out at the same time that the changes in the Solution Manager. That's the change management Solution Manager part. Now, in regards to the testing,
regards to the testing, yeah, we just focus on the SAP side about test-driven development on the SAP side. So, to be honest, at the moment I'm not sure what is possible in the Solution Manager. We have to check it at the moment. I cannot answer it.
I mean, there was, I'm not sure if it came over, but there is also the possibility to have user-defined checks. So you can write something in ABAP maybe to check something on another system, but it's not a part of the standard functionality. And it's, again, I think something that needs to come across is this is not that the solution manager is doing something there in the background. It's actually ATC checking the ABAP code. I don't think ATC understands Java or Python or JavaScript or something else, so you probably have to have some kind of integration with another tool on that side, and I'm not aware that there's anything there, but I'm sure it's easy to find out. Any other questions? Then I think somebody we forgot in the credits, a super special thanks to Bernhart because he provided us with a notebook because we forgot our adapter at home. But then thank you, and thanks for having us, and if you have anything else, we're also happy to talk to you in the breaks. Thank you.
Okay. We directly have the next session. Yep.
Yes, my voice is a little because of that.
Yeah.